Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to today's weekly Sohbet and Dhikr. I hope everybody is well, wherever you are watching this from. Today is we're heading into the last Friday in Ramadan, so there'll be about a week left of fasting. And this time next week, we should all be celebrating Eid, alhamdulillah. So this is a time to make the most of these last remaining days of this year's Ramadan. Today is also election day in the United Kingdom. So if you haven't already, don't forget to cast your vote. Polling stations will be open until 10 o'clock. So, make the most of that. People might not realize today, because I mean, if you live in Britain or you live in the United States or a country that is a democracy, it has been for a long time, you might take for granted the fact that we have the right to vote. But the reality is that we're very fortunate to have this. And in the past, there were people like Emily Pankhurst, who protested just to be able to get the opportunity to be able to vote in an election who they wanted. And some of them, like Emily Pankhurst herself, ended up losing their lives in the process. So we shouldn't take this for granted. And there are many people who live in other countries around the world who don't get the opportunity to be able to have a say in how their country is governed. So do not take it for granted and make the most of it. Sure, who we elect in might not make all the decisions that we would like them to make. I mean, that's the thing with democracy. It is a compromise. It is a compromise because you've got how many people in an area, let's say, even for a councillor, you could have maybe 10,000 people living in that ward to elect that councillor in. So how does, even if the councillor who's elected in is the most diligent and decent human being, which, well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt, even if they are, how do they represent 10,000 people and everything those 10,000 people want? Of course, it's a compromise. And among them, of course, they would have those that voted for them, which might be about, let's say, a quarter or a third of the people who live in that area. So they really have to consider what those people want, because otherwise they're not going to vote for them next time around. But and that's the most, if they're decent and diligent. And of course, politicians being politicians, some of them are and some of them aren't. Some of them are just in it for a job and for the prestige that comes with holding public office. And others are very decent public servants. And over the years, I've met both, and I've met both in all different political parties. So some of them who I do count as friends. So, but we are lucky. We are lucky. We can at least vote for them, and we can stand as well. If you live in a democratic society and you are a person of good standing, you can stand in an election and put yourself forward. You could be the next councillor or MP. If you don't like what they're doing, then give a better proposal to the people and put yourself forward. Take part in it. There are some among Muslims who question about democracy. because they wonder, well, isn't this a system that has developed in Britain and other Western countries? So how can we partake in that? But there's an interesting thing about this, because although historically it is true, a number of Muslim countries had a system called caliphate initially. And then later on, a lot of these caliphates, certainly the early ones, and even the later ones that were developed, they degenerated into monarchies. And so they would become hereditary. But this wasn't the way that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, set things up. This was how things developed over time. An interesting thing is, if we look back at how the Prophet Muhammad himself did things, he actually had a shura. When in Medina, he was invited to become the head of their city. In effect, it was a city-state, although they didn't use the terminology. But when he was invited to become the head of their city, because they needed someone who could bring people together, because you had two groups that were constantly fighting with each other, and it was very tribal. And they saw in Muhammad someone who they could invite, who would be able to, he's not originally from Medina, so that he was someone who could come into that town and be a neutral party and bring the two parties together and stop the historical feuding which had gone on for generations. And Muhammad very effectively did this. And he organized a system in place where firstly there was a constitution of Medina, which all the different people, all the leaders of the different communities in Medina signed onto as equal participants. And that wasn't only those people who embraced Islam, it included people who were still pagans, and it included people who were from Jewish communities. And they all signed on to become equal partners in Medina. In effect, they become citizens of Medina. But of course, this is modern terminology. But that, in effect, that's what they became. And so Muhammad organized them, all the people of significance within that community who were representing the different parties. He organized them into what was called a shura. Now, what is a shura in modern English? A shura is, in effect, a council. It could be a council, it could be a parliament. It is a group of representatives from the people who come together. And when there are important decisions to be made, such as where they're going to build the new houses, or how they're going to defend the city, what kind of defenses they're going to put in place so it protects the city from their enemies, how they're going to distribute food or organize agriculture in the area, all these decisions, they would actually come together and they would have a discussion and they would vote on it. Now, I ask you, if that's not democracy, what is democracy? So we have an example from Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him himself, of a democratic process. Now, sure, that was more like Greek democracy than the democracy that we have in Britain or in America. Democracy has been developed over time. And there are reasons we don't use Greek democracy today. Reasons that, although it has its benefits, it also has its flaws and its issues. And that's why new systems of democracy were brought about. But the basic concept of it, to consult people, to see what the people want, and to put something in place which people are happy with, rather than just top down telling everybody what they should do. This is from the Prophet Muhammad. He showed us this is how you should govern the state. I have also got on my website many years ago a letter that Imam Ali wrote to Malik Ashtar. And if we read in that letter how he advised people how they should govern their countries, there are elements in there which, firstly, justice. There's a very strong emphasis on justice, that you have to be just to all the people, to all the different constituents within the state. You have to be fair in your dealings. You can't show bias or have corruption within your state. You have to try to reduce this so people can see that you are a fair leader. And you have to consult people, you have to talk to the people and see what their issues are and try to address their issues and their concerns. People have to know that you are listening to them and that you are representing as best you can their interests, looking out for their best interests. This is what Imam Ali taught to Malik Ashtar, which again is in line with what the Prophet Muhammad did in Medina. So these concepts, they were picked up by Western countries. They were picked up by European nations like Britain and France and other European nations, and they're picked up by the United States and form the basis of modern democracies. But these ideas are found within Islam as well. And so just because historically we might look at a lot of Muslim history and see sultans who were in effect kings, who were ruling as any king does from top down, and think that that is the way things should be. But this isn't actually what the Quran teaches. It isn't actually what the Prophet Muhammad advocated. He advocated shura. And I think it's no surprise that a whole chapter of the Quran is named Ashura, which means a council or parliament. So, alhamdulillah, for those of us who are in the world who are fortunate enough to live in a democratic country, where we have the ability to be able to vote in elections, we have citizens' rights and recourse to courts of law in an independent judiciary. Alhamdulillah, we are living in countries which are implementing principles that the Prophet Muhammad taught us, and which his righteous caliphs who followed after him also did their best to implement. And we should be appreciative of that. And those people who live in other countries around the world where this is not the case, those who have influence and power within those countries should take a leaf out of this and look at this system and how this is beneficial for people. It's beneficial to create a more harmonious society. Of course, any system you can point out its flaws, you can point out when it goes wrong. But to be able to live in a society where you can speak freely, where you can vote for the representatives that make laws, that make decisions and policies which affect the ordinary people, this is a tremendous blessing. And it is something which we really need to fortify in the modern world, because it has come under threat. And we have to understand that when that comes under threat, everyone comes under threat. It doesn't matter what religion we are, what ethnicity we are. If we end up living in a society where democracy becomes threatened, where democracy recedes, where the rule of law recedes, who is safe? Who is protected? This is in nobody's interests, regardless of what their religious beliefs are or, their backgrounds. We all benefit from having a society founded upon the rule of law, founded upon citizens' rights, founded upon the principle of good governance, of good governance. And as Muslims, this also is in religion. We can see the example from the Prophet Muhammad and from the early righteous caliphs. So we should actually do our best to support this kind of system and to implement this kind of system within our communities, because it is beneficial for everyone. Back to Ramadan, we are in the last 7 days. These nights are also very special within the last 10 days of Ramadan. So, if you are able, obviously no pressure, because everybody's got different lives and there might be reasons why you can't do this. But and if there are, then Allah will understand, obviously, because Allah knows your situation better than anyone. But if you are able to stay up at night and to do extra prayers, to do extra zikr, it is a very beneficial time to do it within these last 10 days of Ramadan. There are slightly different ways that these are taught by various sheikhs as to how you can do it. Obviously, everybody knows about the Tarawih prayers. But you can also read various dhikrs. You can also pray things like Salatul Tasbih and things like this. So if you are able to do that, or read Quran, um, even just reading Quran and reflecting upon its meaning as well. Don't just recite the Quran in Arabic, although it's good to do that, but also reflect upon its meaning. Try to understand that which Allah is teaching us. Because the Quran is a message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a book of advice and guidance. Obviously, there is going to be a blessing of reciting Allah's words. Just from this, there's going to be a blessing in that because they are Allah's words. But more than just reciting them, there is a blessing in actually understanding the words of Allah and understanding this advice and guidance, which is, of course, its real purpose. And then to try to reflect on that and implement what we can of that in our daily lives. Otherwise, what is the point of a book of guidance and advice if we don't reflect upon it and try to implement it? I have to keep the Sohbet a bit short today. As you can probably see, I'm in a different setting. And this is because I have other things which I have to do this evening. So please forgive me for keeping the Sohbet short. But I hope you still found it interesting and worthwhile. I will go into the Dhikr now. And again, I will shorten it slightly this evening. I will start the Dhikr. And before we start the Dhikr, we should always check our intentions and check that we're doing this purely for the pleasure of God. نويت لعبي نويت الرسل نويت كوا نويت الاعتكاف نويت السلوك نويت الرياضة لله تعالى في هذا جميل. I intend to perform the 40 days of retreat. I intend to retreat in isolation. I intend to retreat in solitude. I intend to perform the retreat. I intend to follow the path. I intend to perform the spiritual practices for Allah the highest in this place of worship. If you don't know these particular words, just check your heart and check that you are doing this purely for the pleasure of God. This is the main thing. Worship your Lord until He grants you certainty. Now we begin with the recitation of recitation of the Kalama Shahada. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is His servant and emissary. We seek Allah's forgiveness by reciting Astaghfirullah. Astaghfirullah, 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 Astaghfirullah. أستغفر الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم وأتوب إليه. إنه هو التواب الرحيم يا مسبب الأسباب يا مفاتيح الأبواب يا مقلب القلوب والأبصار يا دلائل المتخيرين يا غيث مستغيث يا حي يا قيوم يا ذو الجلال والإكرام وفويل أمر الله إن الله بصيرا بالعباد. Arabic Sharifa, direct your heart to the heart of your Sheikh. بسم الله الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. We recite salawat, seeking blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad and his noble family. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم 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 اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك وإن من يسرا إن من يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك وإن من يسرا إن من يسرا وإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا وإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن من يسرا إن من يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن من يسرا إن من يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. سورة إخلاص الشريفة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. سورة الفاتحة الشريفة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. صلوات الشريفة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم. 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 أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي قد اتيتني من الملك ورمتني من طوارق خدير
فطير السماوات والأرض أنت وليه في الدنيا والآخرة توفاني مسلما ولكني بالصالحين أمان بالله صدق الله العظيم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين إلا شرف النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وآله وصحبه الكرام وإلا واقي أنبياء والمرسلين وكل من شرعين وإلا إماتي أبوا وإلا مسيحنا بترك نقشبندية عالية قصة إلى آلف وجدان الفاتحة بسم الله الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. There is no God except the God. In Arabic, we say this as La ilaha illallah. 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 Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونقول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم إلا الشرع في نبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وآله وأصحابه الكرام وإلا واهي سوي سنتنا وسلكيون الفاتحة بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. The remembrance of God. In Arabic, Allah just means the God. God you can neither see nor hear, doesn't manifest in these usual ways, but is nevertheless there. And you can if you're sensitive, you can perceive this. Though everything around us is a veil, hiding the presence of God. Bismillah. Allah, Allah. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Allah is often remembered with who. Allah who. Who is Arabic and means is. So when we recite Allah who, we're saying Allah is. So here we recite on who to connect with the presence of God. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. God is truth and the ultimate truth, the source of all truth. In Arabic, truth is haq, and it is one of the names of Allah. Haq, 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 haq. Allah is the ever-living, the one who was never born and who will never die, the spirit of all universes. So we recite Hay, which is Allah's name that means the ever-living. Hay, 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 hey, 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 hey. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الله 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 حق 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 Allahu Allah Hak, Allahu Allah Hak, Allahu Allah Hay, 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 Allahu Allah Hay. Allah Hayy Ya Qayyum, 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 Allah Hayy Ya Qayyum. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. We now get to the final part of today's Dhikr, where we call upon the beautiful names of Allah, and then we recite a few salawat and read dua for everybody. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yahu, Yahu, Ya Daim. Yahu, Yahu, Ya Daim. Yahu, Yahu, Ya Daim. Allah, Yahu, Ya Daim. Ya Daim, Ya Daim, Ya Daim, Ya Allah. Ya Daim, Ya Daim, Ya Daim, Ya Allah. Ya Halim, Ya Halim, Ya Halim, Ya Allah. Ya Halim, Ya Halim, Ya Halim, Ya Allah. Ya Hafiz, Ya Hafiz, Ya Hafiz, Ya Allah. Ya Hafiz, Ya Hafiz, Ya Hafiz, Ya Allah. Ya Latif, Ya Latif, Ya Latif, Ya Allah. Ya Latif, Ya Latif, Ya Latif, Ya Allah. Ya Ghaffar, Ya Ghafur, Ya Ghaffar, Ya Ghafur, Ya Ghaffar, Ya Ghafur, Ya Ghaffar, Ya Ghafur. Ya Sata, Ya Fata, Ya Sata, Ya Fata, Ya Sata, Ya Fata, Ya Sata, Ya Fata, Ya Mujib, Ya Mujib, Ya Mujib, Ya Allah, Ya Mujib, Ya Mujib, Ya Mujib, Ya Allah, Ya Muin, Ya Muin, Ya Muin, Ya Allah, Ya Muin, Ya Muin, Ya Muin, Ya Allah, Ya Mughith, Ya Mughith, Ya Mughith, Ya Allah, Ya Mughith, Ya Mughith, Ya Mughith, Ya Allah. Ya Wadud, Ya Wadud, Ya Wadud, Ya Allah. Ya Wadud, Ya Wadud, Ya Wadud, Ya Allah. Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Rahim, Ya Karim, Ya Rahim, Ya Karim, Ya Rahim, Ya Karim, Ya Rahim, Ya Karim, Ya Dayan, Ya Subhan, Ya Dayan, Ya Subhan, Ya Dayan, Ya Subhan, Ya Dayan, Ya Subhan, Ya Hanan, Ya Manan, Ya Hanan, Ya Manan, Ya Hanan, Ya Manan, Ya Hanan, Ya Manan, Ya Subhan, Ya Sultan, Ya Subhan, Ya Sultan, Ya Subhan, Ya Sultan, Ya Subhan, Ya Sultan, Ya Sultan, Ya Sultan, Ya Sultan, Ya Allah, Ya Sultan, Ya Sultan, Ya Sultan, Ya Allah, Ya Aman, Ya Aman, Ya Aman, Ya Allah, Ya Aman, Ya Aman, Ya Aman, Ya Allah, Ya Salam, Ya Salam, Ya Salam, Ya Allah, Ya Salam, Ya Salam, Ya Salam, Ya Allah, 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 Ya Allah. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ورب لا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. صلوات الشريف الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وسلم. 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 صلي ربي وسلم على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى الكريم أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. على أشرف من سيدنا محمد الصلوات على أفضلين من سيدنا محمد الصلوات على أكبرين من سيدنا محمد الصلوات صلوات الله وبركاته وأنبيائه ورسوله وجميع خلقه على محمد وعلى آل محمد عليه وعليه السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته ولله تبارك وتعالى أن ترتينا شعب رسول الله أجمعين وأن تبينا بهم بإحسان وأن يمتدين يوم الدين وأن علماء المتقين وأن أولياء الصالحين ومشيخنا في ترك نقشبندية عالية كرسل وتراهم الزكية ولولا أثرتهم بركة ولوت علينا من بركاتهم وفيوداتهم دائما والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Ya Allah, we seek your blessing upon the Prophet Muhammad and his noble family, his noble ancestors and his noble descendants, upon all the previous prophets and their noble ancestors and their noble descendants, and upon the household of the Prophet Muhammad, Imams Ali, Hassan, Hussein, Zain al-Abidin, Jafar Sadiq, and all of his holy household, and all of the righteous companions, and the righteous caliphs, and the scholars and the saints, and especially my sheikhs, Sufi Abdullah and Maulana Sheikh Nazim. Ya Allah, bless their souls and raise their stations in your divine presence. And Ya Allah, bless Sheikh Sharif Hidayatullah and all of the Wali Sangha, and Sheikh Yusuf, Gusto, Sheikh Adang Badruddin, and my dear father, Richard Kevin Armstrong. And bless his soul and raise his station in your divine presence. Grant him whatever blessings in paradise that he would like to enjoy. Ya Allah, bless my mum and my father, my mother and father-in-law, grant them the best of health and well-being, long lives, and success in every good things which they set their hearts and minds to. Ya Allah, bless all our mothers and fathers, bless all our brothers and sisters, our nieces and nephews, our cousins, and all of our dear wives and husbands, and all of our children, Ya Allah. Ya grant our families your divine protection and your blessing. Forgiveness for any sins and mistakes that we make in life. Grant us to be under your divine guidance and support. Grant us good inspirations in our hearts and minds, which will lead us right throughout our lives. Ya Allah, bless our communities. Bless especially our friends, those real friends who stick with us through hard times. Grant them special blessings. And bless all of our friends. And if they are going through any difficulties, grant them support and blessings with whatever they are going through. And bless everyone in our human family, in all the countries of the earth. And inspire our hearts to understand that we are all part of one human family. Inspire us to do what is good and what is best, so that we may bring the peoples of the world closer together and into harmony with each other, so that we may be able to put war behind us and beat our weapons into plows, as it says in your Bible, and make this world a more peaceful and constructive place. And not only for human communities, but for all the communities with which we share this earth. For sure, there are so many communities of life all around us, animals and plants and fungi, and they all are part of your creation. Each of your creations you obviously dearly love, otherwise you wouldn't have created them. So inspire our hearts and inspire our minds and guide our hands so that we may be more constructive in how we go about development on this earth. So we will go about things in a way which, yes, looks after the needs of our human communities, but also looks after the needs of the other communities with which we share this earth, so that we can have a harmonious existence and one which is sustainable and can continue on. Ya Allah, it is surely a tragedy, the amount of damage that we have reaped upon this earth through our foolishness. and our shortcomings of vision and insights. Ya Allah, inspire us to do better, for surely you have created us, that we have the potentiality to be better than angels or worse than devils. Allow us to realize that station of being better than angels, or at least somewhere in that direction, rather than behaving like devils, Ya Allah. You have created us to be better than devils, so we shouldn't be behaving like devils. Ya Allah, inspire our hearts for everyone in our human family, so that we can create a better world, and one which is beneficial for everyone in all the communities with which we share this earth. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. صلي ربي وسلم على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى القرون أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إلى حضرات النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، وإلى أنبياء وإلى أولياء قصتان روحي نقشبند، وإلى الشيخ عبد الله فيض الدغستاني، وإلى زندقية، وإلى صوفي عبد الله، وإلى مولانا الشيخ نازم الدلقاني، وإلى غوستو، وإلى شيخ أدان بدرالدين، وإلى الشيخ هشام كباني، وإلى الشيخ بادشاه، وإلى الشيخ حبيب الله، وإلى الشيخ داود رسول، وإلى الشيخ محمد الديل، وإلى الشيخ نوكباني، وإلى صعيوي سردينا وصديقيون. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, this is a special Sudanese hat that I was gifted. Salam alaikum. I'm afraid I will have to leave you a little earlier this evening because I do have another appointment after this. I wish you all the very best. Please, if you find these videos beneficial and useful, don't forget, if you haven't already, to subscribe to my Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube channels so that you can be kept up to date with the latest live broadcasts and videos. I wish you all the very best. If you are in the UK, have a good evening. If you are in Indonesia, then have a good night and good sleep. And if you are in the United States, then have a good morning. But wherever you are in the world, I wish you all of the very, very best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.